The secret to all this is very simple. Your success is going to be directly proportional to how many times you say something like, why don't we get together and chat about your real estate needs and see if I can help?
Today we have an Olympian here and a top real estate team leader that sells $140 million of real estate each and every year. He's a team leader of 12, and he competed in the 1984 Olympics. And he's the leader of the Tulip team in Ottawa, Ontario. Bill, welcome to the call.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate being here.
Well, this is a real treat here, Bill. I know we've talked a little bit in past conferences, but we're going to dig in a little bit deeper and find out. We really want to know, how did this all start? So you're an Olympian. I want to hear the Olympic story on how you made it, and then how you transitioned into becoming a real estate agent, but not just an agent, a top agent in your market as well.
Sure. Well, if we start with the Olympics first, I guess that story is water polo. I competed in water polo in 1984 at the Olympics were in Los Angeles. I guess in September of 77, I got a call from the coach of the national team. I was living in Burlington, Ontario at the time, and I was just 18, and he was a newer coach, but he had just come back from a European tour and decided to get rid of a couple of the older guys on the team and add a couple new rookies. And I was fortunate enough to be kind of on his hit list, if you will. So in September, I got that phone call. I remember it. It was 9 o'clock Tuesday morning, September, right after Labor Day. And I was just starting, I was just starting college. I hadn't even started college. It was just about to start at 9 o'clock. I'm standing in a large auditorium with about 600 other people. And the guy comes up on the stage and says, "Is there a Bill Meyer here?" I go to the stage. He goes, "You're supposed to call home immediately." I think, oh my God, what's happening? I mean, the house blew up. My mom had an accident, something, So I call home. My dad answers the phone. He said, "Coach Gabor from Ottawa called, wants to know if you want to go to Moscow in 1980. I thought, "Dad, what are you talking about?" So anyways, I called this fellow back, and it was Coach Gabor Chepergy. As I mentioned, he'd just taken over the national team a few months before that. And Wednesday morning, I hopped on a plane. I moved to Ottawa, and I've been here ever since. So I was fortunate enough, I don't know how or why, but I was fortunate enough in about 4 months, I made the starting lineup and never gave up my position in the 8 years I was with the team. So I felt very grateful for that. It allowed me to, as I say, travel all over the world for a number of years. And of course, we boycotted the 1980 Olympics because of some political unrest where Russia had invaded Afghanistan. And so the Western world decided not to go to the Olympics in Moscow. But fortunately, I was one of the younger players on the team and could train for another 4 years, and eventually did go to the LA Olympics.
How did you handle that when you've been training all these years, and that excitement of finally the Olympics are coming around, and then, oh, we're not having them we're not competing in them this year. How was that for you and the other athletes? I can imagine that'd be tough.
Yeah, for me, it was a little easier to swallow for that same reason. I knew I wasn't finished yet, but there had been some guys on my team, some of my players that either were at the 76 Olympics or just missed the 76 Olympic team. And so 1980 was kind of their big push to make the team. So for me, it wasn't as big a challenge as some of my other teammates because I was quite willing and able to stick around for 4 more years. I felt after the first 4 years, I was really just getting started.
Yeah. Well, like the guys that didn't play, and they were the older guys, I wonder, how did they handle, 4 years? You can imagine that's like their lifelong dream, right?
Yeah.
And, the reason I'm kind of digging into this a little bit is you probably saw some guys that were, they handled it really well, and then others not so well. So is there a lesson learned that, the guys that actually handle it well, this is what they did? And maybe even for yourself as well. Well, you had another shot potentially, right, as well at that time because you were younger, but handling rejection and a big challenge like that, were there any kind of lessons learned or insights that you took from going through that?
Well, I think, well, jokingly, I guess I'll start there first. I mean, we didn't go to the Olympics because Russia invaded Afghanistan, but yet the Americans were in Afghanistan for 20 years, and we went to their Olympics, in '84. So but at that time I was still, I guess I would have been, about 20 years old 22 years old at the time, and just really just understanding that, how politics does play such a big part in sports. So for me, as I say, I mean, it was 40 years ago, but I didn't, there was really no psychological or physical abuse. It was,
Hmm.
it was, next day I went to practice,
Yeah, just
and
showed
there was,
up for it.
4 or 5 guys who weren't there because they weren't going to train for another 4 years.
Right.
So some of them
Yeah.
hung out for a year or two, at World Championships or Pan Am Games, or some of the international tournaments that we participated in. But as I say, generally speaking, for me, it really wasn't an issue, and that I was just fortunate enough to be healthy enough and young enough and to go another 4 years.
And what do you think you did to get there? Did you always play water polo? Like what was it that got you there, do you think? Because
Well,
that's super competitive
I mean,
Olympics.
again, water polo is not a big sport in our country. It's very much an
Yeah.
Eastern European sport, where it's very popular. And we had in Canada, if you go back to the sporting days, I mean, '76 we hosted the Olympics in Montreal. Okay, and at that time there was a lot of money in sport because the government was really funding a lot of sport because we were hosting the Olympics. And at the end of the end of '76, there was still some money and some infrastructure that had been created,
Mhm.
that allowed you know teams like water polo, which is a low profile sport, to have professional coaches and good pool time and access to good trainers and sports psychologists at the time. So there was a lot of, I want to say, money in the sport, at that time. As far as myself, I just liked swimming when I was a kid. When I went to high school in grade 9, I decided I was going to go out for the swim team. That year, my phys ed teacher, who was the swim coach, decided to start a water polo team. I figured, well, I'm as good as everybody else because nobody's ever played the game. So for whatever reason, when I was 13, 14, 15, I did okay. So to hear your name on the morning announcements, the MM Robinson beat the Delta Ravens, 14-6 in a water polo match. Bill Meyer scored 7 of those goals. You hear that, and it kind of, at that teenager year, it kind of motivates you to try a little harder or to keep going at least. A year later, they started a couple fellows in Burlington started a club team. So I went out for that club team. That got me, I want to say, to various provincial tournaments, national tournaments, things like that. And as I say, kind of caught the eye of a few other people. '77, there was the Canada Games, and water polo was part of the Canada Games. And for those of you who don't know the Canada Games, it's really kind of a junior Olympics for each province has a team, if you will. And so I was fortunate enough to make the Ontario team, and we won the gold medal. Okay, and when it really comes down to it, here's the story I tell. We had to tie Quebec in order to win the gold. It was a round robin tournament. You've been enough sporting to know how that works. Sometimes it's not the one game that decides the winner. It was a round robin, and the score was 7-7 with 2 seconds left, and the game ended 8-8. Okay, so basically with 2 seconds left, Quebec scored a goal, was up
Wow.
8-7. Of course, they're all celebrating and jumping
Yeah.
for joy and high fiving. We lined up at the way you line up in water polo after a goal scored. Your team lines up at half. You have the ball. You pass it back to one of your players, and the clock starts. Well, it turns out that my centerman passed me the ball. I shot right away, went over the goalie's head, and scored a goal with
Oh,
less than a second left, made it 8-8, and that's what won the gold medal. Now,
Oh,
remember
wow.
that coach I told you about, Gabor?
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was the coach of the Quebec team.
Quebec team.
So
He
he
remembers
noticed
that.
he
Yeah.
noticed this Bill Meyer guy. I happened to be the top scorer of the tournament as well, so I had a good tournament, but that's how he recognized me, or he got to know me. So when he took over the team, a couple months later, and was looking for a couple younger guys, that's when he brought me on. So that was kind of my history there, playing high school, club,
Love that.
provincial, and then, as I say, kind of making a name for myself by scoring a memorable goal.
Yeah. What a great story. And, when I played hockey, I realized that there were playoff players, like the clutch players. And then there were the ones that were more regular season, right? And so for you, I mean, you came through, it sounds like quite a bit. I mean, that was a big game to be able to come through in there. What do you think separates maybe the clutch players, the ones that actually step up? I mean, you would see this in real estate as well, but being an athlete, there are some players that step up when they're under pressure. And there's others that are maybe they just buckle. And it's the same in business as well. They get a little bit of pressure and then they buckle. What do you think is maybe a consistent theme or an attribute in people that don't buckle? And I know it's a little bit of it's a tough question, but is there anything that resonates? Because you've been around a lot of like the best of the best athletes in the world.
I think and again, I didn't know, I didn't have this phrase back then, I mean,
Yeah.
it's through my learning and growing and maturing, but I think staying in the moment. I mean, I really think that, I
Right.
mean, unfortunately, the Quebec players, they were staying too much in the moment. They were
Yeah, they were
celebrating.
thinking about having their beer after, right? Yeah, we're going to be
Yeah,
partying and right.
they were celebrating that gold medal that they hadn't quite won yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess just staying in the moment, I think, is how I would describe it right then. And that, hey, we need a goal. We got less than a second left. We've got one shot. Give me the ball. So I mean that. In the meantime, my coach is on deck yelling at the center to pass the ball to somebody else.
Oh, yeah. But you
We've
wanted
got,
the ball. You were calling for it.
yeah,
Like
that's
give
right.
it to
Yeah, and so my coach and I have talked about that over the years. That how that turned out. That I was screaming at my
yeah.
player to pass me the ball, and he was yelling at him to pass the ball to somebody else. So, but anyway.
Well, and to me, it's like such a great attribute, like that skill set to be able to take into business, wanting the ball in the clutch moment. I think that really separates, as there's a confidence there. Like you just know that you're gonna come through, and obviously you did in that case. So it reminds me. I was training my son. He woke up one day and he's like, "Hey, Dad," he's like, "Can you train me?" My middle guy, and he was about 14. He's like, no, no. He's like, "Can you wake up at 5 a.m. and train me?" And so I'm like, oh, fine. I saw this desire in his eyes, and I sat down with him. It's okay. What are your goals? And for 5 months straight, the kid was up at 5:15 waiting at the door for me, like every day.
Yeah.
And one day we'd work out, the next day we'd go for a run. And one of the things that when I was training him, and then now he's taken it to a whole new level. Like he went to YouTube and he's like, he's benching 265 and squatting like 350, and he's like 15 years old. And when I was training him, I said, "Hey, Ryan," I'm like, "when we run, you run past the line, right? Don't give up at the last right before. It's like run to the line, but run past it." And it goes back to being in the moment, I think, right? And you see that in a lot of competitive sports, right? In the 100 meter, the guys that, or the gals, just competing, the ones that look up the last minute, or they're looking at their competition instead of saying focus on their own race.
Yeah.
They're the ones that end up generally losing. And so I think that's such a good lesson for, real estate agents that are competing. It's like set your own goal and push yourself. And obviously it's important to see what competition and to be aware, but at the end of the day, like stay focused on, striving your own path rather than just always looking over the shoulder.
Yeah. You
If
can
that
only
makes
control
sense.
what you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's a great story. Now, what do you think from competing in the Olympics you were able to pull out that made you so successful? And we're going to jump in a minute to how you started in real estate, going from
Yeah.
Olympic athlete over
Yeah.
to a top team leader. But were there anything that were like, okay, this was like definitely a key trait that I was able to pull out of competing in the Olympics into
Yeah.
being successful in
Well,
real estate?
I wouldn't say so much, the actual games at the Olympics. It was the whole process, the whole Olympic experience, if you will. The discipline. You mentioned your son's, dedication and desire. Okay, so it's really that discipline, dedication, and desire that I feel that I've brought from my sports world into my business world. Yeah. And again, just having that experience. I mean, it does. It is a good. Well, it's a good training ground for anything. I mean, And I'll be honest with you, as much as I talked about being the top scorer in the in the Canada Games and scoring that final goal, really when I got to the Olympic team, national team, I was a utility player. Okay, I mean I wasn't the
Okay.
best goal scorer. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't anything but a hard working guy that everybody could count on. And I
Uh,
played my 3.5 to 4 quarters a game, for 8 years. And when I really asked, what did I do special? Nothing. But yet everybody, coaching staff would say if we could have a team of Bill Myers, that would be better than having a team of X or Y who scores goals. Okay, and that I was just a good utility player that just put my discipline and work into each and every game, and for that matter, practice. I think that's a big deal too.
mm,
How you show up at practice,
mm,
often dictates how you will show up at a game or in a tough situation.
that's so good. So you being a great team player, that was something that you had innately in you. And so I guess just showing up, working hard. Was there anything else that made you a great team player there? Because I mean, obviously you've done that. Now you've built a team of 12, and people look at you, and I when I first met you, I'm like, Bill, this is a very likable guy, right? You just instantly. It's not about. It's about. I think you genuinely care for people. But is there anything when you see team members or the ones that really thrive, and even from your own experience, make team members great team members?
Well, I mentioned this in something. I mentioned Stephen Covey. He wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and he talks about the different types of relationships. When you're very you're very dependent, like a child, very dependent on your parents, or you're very independent. When you become a teenager, or a young adult, I mean, you don't want anything to do with your parents. You want to do everything on your own. But there's this level of interdependency. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
where you realize that you're better together. Okay, I
Mm,
mean, when you get to a certain age, you got kids. Well, having your parents around are great. You need grandparents to take care of the kids when you need to go away with your wife. So that interdependency is very important, and I think that's an aspect of being a good team player is to have that knowledge and that sense of interdependency. That it's not me against somebody, or it's not just me for me. It's understanding that. Who else? So, you say, if you want to go fast, you go alone.
yeah,
If you
yeah.
want to go far, you go together.
So
Okay.
that's
So I mean, those kind of statements and things, kind of, how I live my life, I guess, really. And I bring that into my business.
And Bill, whether you're playing on a team or you're, say, an individual agent right now, I think that same, we'll say, trait is what makes an individual agent successful as well, when they realize and they operate on a day-to-day basis that it's not only about them, it's about their key, maybe it's their power team, their lawyers and mortgage brokers and all the rest, like that core team that they formulate. And they realize as well that the team consists of their own clients as well, and the brokerage as well. And the ones that actually, even as individual agents, the ones that I found, the ones that are more like me, and it's all about me, they generally don't thrive in the business long term. But the ones that are very much like go givers, and the ones that they build that team, and it's like, okay, you win, I win, let's win together, instead of I win and you lose. Those ones I found were the ones that remained in the business long term, and they were successful. The ones that it was me, it was like exhausting for them, and maybe they did well for a year or two. It goes back to
Exactly.
the quote you said, but then
Yeah.
they fall short.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they just, have kind of built themselves a bit of a business, by themselves. And it's hard to bring somebody else in, or it's hard to
Yeah.
collaborate with others if that's just not part of your making.
Yeah,
You know.
that's really good insight. All right, now, so you started. What was it that got you into real estate? You're like,
Yeah.
I'm an Olympic athlete. I'm done now being competitive.
Yeah.
Where
Well,
how'd you
okay,
transition?
so 84, by 84, after the Olympics, I was married and I had a 1-year-old. Okay.
Mm,
So, basically came out of the Olympics and I thought, okay, now I need a job. Well, when I was on the team, I always had some sort of sales job. I was always selling something to make extra cash. I mean, back then the Sports Canada was giving their Olympic athletes $265 a month. that was our living allowance, you know. So, and back then it was enough to live. You're living with two or three other guys in a house, and you know, I mean, the beauty was when you traveled, everything was paid for. So you always wanted to go away all summer. You know, the team would go away for 2 or 3 months in the summer. Well, that was great because you actually made money then. You weren't spending it in your own. But anyways, so coming out of the Olympics, I needed a job, and I wanted to sell something. And I thought back then I could sell soap door to door if I wanted to, but I didn't want to sell door to doors. So
Yeah.
I had an interview with the computer company Hewlett Packard at the time. I mean, home computers were not were just a brand new thing, if you will. Everybody had a Commodore 64 back then, you know. But went to Hewlett Packard. They say, hey, a young family man, successful family man out of the Olympics like you, we'd love to have a guy like you on our sales team. Go to university for 5 years, get yourself a computer science degree, come on back and we'll give you a job selling computers. Okay. Then I went to a real estate company. Hey, a young family man like you, fresh out of the Olympics, we'd love to have a salesperson like you on our team. Go to college for 6 weeks, get yourself a real estate license, come on back, and we'll give you a job selling houses. So that was the approach I took. So in March of '85, I had a real estate license, and I was working for a Canada Trust at the time. You know, so when all the banks and all the trust companies had real estate divisions back then, and I worked for Canada Trust.
Wow. You know, and there's a lot of kids that are having those conversations now. And I think, Bill, well, let's talk on that for a second. So, you know, the kids that are coming out of high school now, they're in the same position you were in back then. What do you suggest to kids nowadays, you know, that are coming out of high school, and, you know, university now would be a lot more expensive than, you know, when you had that initial conversation, right? And seeing the workforce now, like, what would you recommend to, say, kids coming out of high school in today's market?
Well, despite what I just said, I'd probably say stay in school and have fun. Like, I mean, you're getting out of high school now at 17 or 18. I coached Carleton University for water polo for 20 some odd years, you know, and you know, so I got to hang out with a lot of 18 and 19-year-old kids throughout my life, if you will. And I just think that's an important time of life that you know, you can afford to go to school. You've got the means for that. Just go for, you know, the experience. Don't expect the degree to be what's going to support you for the rest of your life. You
Okay.
know, so I mean, I watch kids, you know, they change their degrees, you know, I think it's 2.5 times on average. Each student that goes into university changes their degree 2.5 times before they graduate. So just go for the experience, you know, do the school, do the learning. But you know, the friends you make in university will probably, some of them will be with you for the rest of your life. So experience
Mm,
that. You
mm,
know, my real education in friends and you know, had to do more around the Olympics than it had to do with university. Okay, it was all
mm.
about, you know, being with the same group of guys for, you know, for a number of years. Yes, a few of them changed every year, but the core of us stayed together for, you know, for 8 years. But I would recommend that. Now, saying that, as a team leader, what I'm looking for, you know, when I'm looking for a new agent coming into the team, from an education point of view, is I do look for someone kind of in their late 20s, you know, maybe as early 30s, university educated, got their degree, worked in their field for a year or two, and just came to this realization: this is not it. I have more of an entrepreneurial spirit than what this, you know, this psychology job or whatever their job is giving them. But I do. That's kind of what I look for. Is that, you know, someone who's, you know, kind of had the discipline to go to school, complete the school. So that shows me something about the character of that person. And as I say, they tried their field for, you know, a year or a few years, and just are looking for something a little more entrepreneurial. Really realizing that you know, wealth is not going to come from having a 9 to 5 job. And if it's wealth that you're looking for and a certain quality of life, being you know, an entrepreneur is the route to go. And there's no better foot soldier in the entrepreneurial world than a real estate agent.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah. So what I got from that was, when you go to university, like, don't expect the degree to support you for the rest of your life. When you go in for the experience, the contacts, the connections, the friendship group. And then what that shows you as an employer now is the fact that you can commit to something long term, stick with it. So it shows your discipline, and then you've gone into the work, they've gone into the workforce to actually see, what that workforce is, and they realize, what, I want something more with some more potential to that. And then they have, we'll just say the cup is ready to be filled. They have the right ingredients there to have a successful real estate career. Right.
Exactly. And I look for learning based individuals. And just because you come out of university doesn't necessarily mean you're learning based, but it is, it is a factor that you can look at and say, okay, for that time of this person's life when they're 18 to 22, 20, 21, 22 years of age, they brought discipline into their life
Mm,
enough to get a piece of paper that said, hey, you came to class, you wrote your test, here's your
yeah.
piece of paper.
Yeah, that's right. For me, I found like the number one trait for kids coming out of university now is that there's still that humility and humbleness and willingness to learn. If they can have that along with the discipline you talked about, they have a really great, we'll say, they have even more ingredients of the right ingredients to really skyrocket. Because when some of the challenges I've seen, more so if you've been in for longer in school, there's that degree really shows, like you had said, the discipline to be able to stick with it. But when you're getting into another profession, it's like you got to be willing to start over and to have that rookie mindset, right? And so if you can have that along with, the discipline and the ability to commit to something, put that same intentionality into this, uh man, you can do a lot. It's just having that humility after spending all that time in it. that's
Well,
that's something that's
and
important.
experiencing, I want to say the feelings of success when you do complete something.
That's right. Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
it's one thing to go to school and take a bunch of courses, but I mean to actually complete something. Unless that was your plan. If your plan was just,
Yeah.
hey, I'm just going to university to take a bunch of courses and play
Yeah.
football. I mean, it's
Yeah.
great. There's nothing wrong with that. But as I say, that sense of accomplishment, I think it's important in the in our business to celebrate the wins, because there can be this job can beat you up. We've seen that especially in the last couple of years. It can beat you up pretty well.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've got to be able to overcome those obstacles. But if you can, if the thrill of victory, if you will, well then it pulls you through the tough times sometimes.
Yeah. No, looking back on your career in being an Olympian, you probably had days you woke up that didn't feel like training,
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I could imagine you probably had a few of those in your time.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there was a time where actually we had come back from a tournament. It was called Can-Am Mex. It was a 7 games in Canada, 7 games in Mexico, 7 games in the U.S. And there was our 3 teams, and then there was a half a dozen European teams in this, and we'd lost every single game. We lost 21 games in a row. And I just remember flying back, and I happened to be sitting beside my coach, and both of us were very depressed, if you will. Anyways, I'll cut step ahead to the issue here we were talking about. I went to that was kind of on a Saturday night or something. Anyways, we had like a day off. Like nobody was very happy with anybody, so there was no, hey, take time to celebrate, guys. And I got to the practice. It was April 1st, 1981, and the warm up that was given was 2 times 400 IM, which is individual medley. It's 4 lengths of fly, 4 lengths of back, 4 lengths of breast, 4 lengths of freestyle. You do that twice. It's just a warm up. I did my first 400, finished, got to the second 400, and I just couldn't be wet anymore. I mean, that was what my mind said. Get out. You can't. I'm tired of being wet. And I walked up to my coach and I said exactly that. I just can't be wet anymore. He said, okay, goodbye. I mean, take some time off. So I literally left the team April 1st of 1981 and came back right after Labor Day, 4 months later. So and that was, as I say, that was just kind of a mental breakdown that I had, and I just needed some time off. And I think the idea that we had just lost 20 games was hard on me. But now after years looking back, realizing how hard it was on my coach, and the scrutiny he was going under. So
Yeah, I can imagine. And that recharge time I think is really important. As an agent, it's like you can go hard for a while, but eventually you do need to recharge the battery. And so the winner is the one that can run the marathon, because success as an agent, and we're going to get into now how you know built the team and started, but the ones that are successful, it's not overnight. It's year after year after year, building block by block by block. And even when you become the top, it's still a game of whack-a-mole. So no teams, and I've talked with most of the successful ones, everybody's trying to figure out a better way always. I've never met anybody that just says, I have everything figured out and it's just perfect. There's always, it's a living, breathing organism, this business, right? And so the ones that are successful, they win it's the marathon game.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But having those breaks along the way is important to be able to get through that marathon.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Now, when you started in the business, you had that conversation with your broker and said, yeah, okay, go 6 weeks of school or whatnot. And you got your license. How did you start, and how did you start getting business at the beginning, from going from scratch, from ground zero?
Again, so we're going back to 85. That was before internet, before computers, before printers, before fax machines. That was writing out offers, using carbon paper, triple copies, driving an offer from one end of the town to the agent who lived in the other end of town, and so it was a different world. As far as marketing back then, you had newspaper, you had magazines, you had postcards, you had door knocking, you had phone calling. I mean, that was basically what you had from a marketing point of view. My first listing was from knocking on doors. I had heard there was a top agent in town who had some, multi-millionaire buyer investor that was looking to buy 60 bungalows in Ottawa. So I just started going from community to community, banging on doors of bungalows, and said that I had a buyer. Find someone who was interested. So that's how I found my first listing. The area I lived in, Alta Vista was the area. I decided to start farming that area, and I would be up at night with letraset. I don't know if you know what letraset is. It's the rub on, rub off letters. You take them off and you can put them on a piece of paper, because I didn't have access to printers and print shops and things like that at the time. So I created, my newsletter by typing on a dot matrix printer and as I say, using letraset to make my front page, and running, 3,000 copies through a photocopier machine, staying up at night watching Letterman with my wife, folding these things in half and then delivering them. And
hand deliver them.
I delivered the first time I delivered all 3,000 by myself. So yes, I delivered them. I called myself the Alta Vista specialist. Never sold a house in Alta Vista before, and had a few agents, some of the older established agents, a little pissed off that I had the gall to call myself the Alta Vista specialist, but it served me well for a couple of years anyways.
Well, you live there, right? That makes you a specialist.
There we go. Yeah,
what's your definition?
Yeah, so...
Let me ask you, when you did the 3,000, you hand delivered all of them. Did you end up getting any conversation? Did you have a conversation or did you just drop it off and stick it in their door?
No, I did have some conversation. No, but I wasn't banging on doors at the time. No, that was just getting it out there.
Because I wonder if you got any. Yeah, go ahead. No,
I eventually whittled that down. From 3,000 because again, just doing a little bit of market research, a little bit of market study. There were two well-established Royal LePage agents, Molly McCunn and Terry Deverins. I don't know if those names mean anything to you, but they were top agents in that area at the time. And I realized that when I looked at the statistics, everything over a certain price, and I'll just pick a price, let's say $150,000. 90% of everything over $150,000 at the time was being sold by those women or Royal LePage. But yet 90% of everything under $150,000 was all over the place. Century 21 had a couple, everybody was all over the place. So then I focused on just that, kind of about 750 homes immediately around me that were priced, kind of in that price range. And then I was putting out something regularly, but again, it was through mail drops. I wasn't delivering anymore, but back then, brokers used to provide a lot of your marketing material. So, with the way Canada Trust was, if you sold a house, they gave you a credit for, 500 postcards or something like that. So that was enough to keep me, as I say, funding my farm area. But I only sold for 5 years, and back then, and then again, I was still, kind of a young. I was well respected in the office because of my work ethic, I guess. Really, some of the older agents, they helped me out. I mean, they
Mm.
saw me working my ass off, and they rewarded me for it. They would get something, a listing out of town that nobody would ever want to list or sell, and they'd say, "Hey, why don't you take this one?" And you'll probably double end it because nobody else is going way the hell out there to look at a house. I got a few deals like that, but anyways, after 5 years, I was offered an opportunity to manage a real estate office. So then I went from selling for 5 years with Canada Trust to managing a real estate office for Canada Trust, which I learned some good skills there because I was the youngest person in the office, and had some top agents who had been in the business for a while. And what I really learned there was how important culture was,
Mm.
to the success. I mean, back then everybody worked in an office. They didn't work at home the way we do today. So, we had anywhere from about 25 to 30 agents at any time in the office, and it was it's where I want to say took some of my leadership skills from water polo into the workplace, leading a highly productive real estate office at the time.
Mm, that's really good. There's a few things that I took out of this that I have some follow-up questions. When you narrowed it down in your market selection, when you were canvassing and sending out those flyers, what would you recommend to an agent today when they're selecting their farm area? Would you recommend what you just said? Like if there's a agent that already owns that, better go into maybe another market that you see, an agent not owning, and then you can be that dominant agent? Or like what
Yeah,
suggestion would you give when you're selecting your
yeah.
market area?
Well, first off, understand that farming, if you can't commit to about 36 months, don't bother starting. I
Okay.
mean, it takes a while. Now, I say 36 months. I mean, somebody could say, "Oh, it doesn't take that long, or it takes longer." But I would say if you can't commit to, a 36-month plan, then don't pick an area. Obviously, you want to look at turnover rate. I mean, if you've got an area of 1,000
Yeah.
homes, and 50 a year sell, it's 5% turnover rate. So you want to look at that, and then you look at market dominance. Does anybody dominate the market? I mean, because if they do, it may be back then it was, I want to say, a tougher nut to crack than it is now. Today, well, I'll continue with farming. So what do I think? So yes, so you farm an area, you put something out regularly, okay? You bang on doors. Every time there's a new listing, it doesn't matter who lists it, you preview that property. Okay, so a couple of things. One is you leave your card, so the people, I mean, if it ever expired, those people know you've been through. If you've been farming it for a while, they, oh, great, Bill Meyer came through, because they've been getting my newsletter for the last 4, 5, 6 years, so that's good. Also, if you do get a listing opportunity, perhaps across the street, you can say, oh yes, when that house was on the market 18 months ago, yes, I saw it. I showed it to one of my clients. I mean, you can speak more knowledgeably about the property. So that's why sometimes, bigger isn't always better. And then look for opportunities to bundle bundle your marketing. Okay, putting out a newsletter or a postcard is not enough. Okay, putting out a newsletter or a postcard and having the two bus benches, kind of on the corners of your neighborhood, that's a little bit better. Putting out a newsletter, having the bus benches and sitting on the community alliance or the neighborhood, whatever they call it in your neighborhood, being part of that, is that much better. So you should look at, kind of bundling. I don't think a bus bench by itself does anything, but a bus bench in your farm area where you're putting out newsletters in every house you've seen, and you're working. Like 2 Saturdays ago, I was roasting marshmallows for kids at the winter fun day in my farm area. So I mean, it's you just want to be part of the community to the best of your ability.
Yeah, that's really good insight. And
I've,
when you did, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was going to say, but I think social media has had an adverse effect on dominating a farm area, because agents are able to stay in touch with people today better than they ever had before. So I mean,
Mm,
I've got a family that owns a home. Well, the best friend of the son, has got mom and dad on their social media. You know what I mean? So they're communicating now through social media. So it's easier for other agents to infiltrate your farm area just through social media and personal contacts than it was in the past.
Mm. When you deliver, that's all wonderful. I love that idea of bundling as well. And, a bus bench, if you just get a bus bench, it's not going to do anything. It's the repetition of seeing your face in multiple different areas is really important. And that would even be more so true today than when you started because of all the ads that are out there. People are getting
That's right.
bombarded.
Yeah.
When you're doing flyers and whatnot, sending it out, what's the consistency or the frequency level that you recommend to agents?
Well, I do believe more is better. Okay. I've been going once a month for about 12 years in my farm area. And with just a newsletter, Morris Marketing. You probably know Morris Marketing, their newsletter. So that's what I've been doing. So the consistency is there. And then I would say probably 3 times a year, I'll have some sort of event where I'm putting out a postcard with a special message on it or something. One of the things I do is, we're the Tulip team. Well, I give out 10,000 tulip bulbs every fall. So we'll have a postcard that goes out. Come down, Saturday morning from 10 to 12 to Kingsmere Park to pick up your tulip bulbs. So I mean something
Yeah.
like that, or there's some sort of special message about the neighborhood annual general meeting that I'll put out in a postcard or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And how
But
big is your,
and living in the neighborhood, you get to see what else
right.
comes in. So you do get to see your competition. You get to see what they're doing, who's doing, what consistently. And as I say, that's basically what I would say from a leaflet or a postcard or a newsletter. It's got to be at least once a month. But there's a lot of successful agents out there that are doing something like that once a week.
Yeah.
I've just never really made that commitment.
But it's consistency that over the long period and doing on multiple different channels as well, it seems to be where you found success. And
And if you have the opportunity, don't just focus on real estate, focus on community activities, when the AGM, when's the winter fun day, when's the summer fun day, looking for volunteers to man the rink this winter. It's those kinds of things as well that the statistics, general or specific neighborhood statistics and some community, activities, I think is important to put in your newsletter if you want it to be read.
Mm. And an agent, when they see you and they're like, okay, if I'm going to start this now, if I'm do it for that many years, and obviously you've committed long term on this, what would be kind of a range of expectation that an agent can, if they do it well? Obviously, you've done it as well as I think anybody can do it, right? But is there a certain percentage of homes on an annual basis that you've seen a theme for overall results?
Um, again, I don't look at that as much as, I look at my own statistics perhaps, and it's been anywhere from 10 to 20% of market share. But I've watched that drop over the last few years, and I keep asking myself why. And that's where I come back to, I think social media has made a big difference, because it used to be, in my neighborhood, there'd be about 50 homes selling a year. Okay. And I'd have my 7 or 8. There'd be another agent with 2 or 3, and now you look at it, there's 50 homes sell, there's 35 other agents. They're all one-offs. I mean, I'll still get my 5 or 6, but there's nobody is getting that, the big dominant market share, at least not now anyways. But I don't look at all neighborhoods, but I think it's the geographical farming, I think, has come down a little bit for some people.
Mm. That's great. Really great insight. And that gives agents out there that are listening just some good context going in, learning from a pro like yourself as well.
Uh, and
Bill,
depending on where you are, I mean, if you were just, look at your neighborhood right now. I mean, I had this conversation last week with an agent who was talking about farming and, talked about different neighborhoods. Well, I think if you went in Ottawa anyways, into a kind of a 2-year-old townhouse neighborhood right now, you would do very well, because all the young families that bought that property probably 4 years ago, that closed on it 2.5 or 3 years ago, by the time it was built and they moved in. Well, they had that one child when they moved in, or they had no kids when they're moving in. So they're all going to move out at the same time, generally speaking. So I think that if you find an area like that, would be an ideal place to go because they didn't have an agent when they bought. They bought brand new from the builder. So there's no relationship there yet. So to find an area that's 2 to 3 years old, that's kind of at the lower end of the price range, you're going to have that listing and they're buying up. So if I was starting over again, that's kind of when I was going to put some investment into farming. I would look for a neighborhood like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really, really smart, really good insight. And culture you had mentioned as well a little earlier. What do you think makes great culture? You said when you transition over to a leadership position, you realize
Yeah,
the importance of culture. And
yeah,
we'll talk about maybe from like a brokerage perspective. So, you built the team, but so individual agents out there that are looking for a brokerage, culture is a big part of that, right? Being in an environment that helps them grow and be successful. What would you say to look for if agents are out there selecting a team or a brokerage?
yeah. Well, first of all, I think there's more of a need for it now than ever. People are lonely. Okay, everybody's isolated. I mean, COVID, is still wreaking havoc on a lot of people's lives, if you will. So I mean, culture. What I would want if I was recommending to an agent is to find an environment that is, if you're a learning based individual, first of all, you got to find a place that supports you and offers some sort of training and learning. Okay, and
Mhm.
ideally, it's not all on Zoom, where you're sitting in your basement, office with 30 other people. I mean, it's in office stuff happening because it's with people that you're going to build the culture. So and as silly as it sounds, it's even the activities that the brokerage offers because that's what creates. I mean, the baseball game in June. We're going to a CFL game in August and having a Christmas event or some sort of holiday event. Or here in Ottawa, we've got the Winterlude that's just wrapping up today. So an environment that looks at activities to to force people to interact with each other because there's an awful lot of people that they need to be forced to interact with each other because they haven't interacted with each other for on a for so long now. So but again, a learning environment that does have some sort of social component to it, I think is important because there's a lot of people who feel isolated and the huge turnover that we've seen in the real estate industry with agents getting out of the business over the last couple of years. It's I'm sure a lot of it has to do with they don't feel connected. People want to feel
Mm.
connected to something. So I mean, if it's your job and you're living, you might as well feel connected to it.
Yeah, that's really good. And, to build on what you're saying about like connecting with people and being around people, what I found is over time, people start to take on the characteristics of the people that they're hanging around. Right. So if you have a culture like that where there's activities and there's other really great people, their personality traits will rub off on you. And it's the same if they're negative as well. So you got to be really careful on who you're selecting. And I'd say like a key thing to really look for in your case, Bill, that would be totally true is who the leader is. And is that somebody that you really want to learn from? Because a
Yeah.
lot of their character traits you'll pick up and will be innate in you as you grow and develop. Like they'll just stick on you over time. So just being very cautious of the culture and the people, because over time you'll become more like them. I'm not sure if that's been your experience.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it has been. And as I say, I think that, I mean, success leaves clues, like even in a brokerage. I mean, what's their turnover? Are people coming and going? I mean, are people sticking? Is the office growing? If it's growing with the right kind of people and people feel that sense of connection, that probably tells you that you have better chance of you feeling that connection if you join that organization.
Yeah, no, that's really good. All right, so okay, let's just say agent starts, they start becoming successful, they start making money. Okay, and they've saved for their taxes and they have extra funds there to invest. What advice would you give to a real estate agent that's looking to invest their money with all the options that are out there today?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
have you learned through the years?
Well, certainly I encourage real estate agents to invest in real estate. Okay, so there's various aspects of real estate depending on, whether you want to be a landlord, whether you want to put it into mortgages, whatever you want to do with it. But I mean, Warren Buffett says that invest in what you know. So that's where you would start. If you don't know anything about real estate, or you don't feel that's the place you're investing in, it would just be index funds. I mean, again, only
Yeah.
because that's the advice I followed 30 years ago when I was reading Warren Buffett. Okay,
Right.
so I've owned some real estate, and I put most of my other money in index funds. That's from a long-term growth point of view. Okay, so first of all, you mentioned the key word is taxes. Make sure you keep an eye on your taxes, and you're having your brokerage, or you've got a separate account set up so your HST is paid for, your income tax, there's a fund there to pay for, because I've seen an awful lot of people that's kind of what their downfall has been. All of a sudden they get behind 1 year, and next, they're down 60 or $80,000 in taxes, and then they just never are able to recover from that. But certainly real estate, and it just depends on where your comfort level is, whether it's a passive investment, or whether it's an actual hands-on. I own a few townhouse condominiums. For me, I had owned a bunch of houses before that, did a lot of student renting, for about 10 years, and then just got tired of the hands-on, sold everything there, to where I put most of my money into index funds at that time. But since then, have bought a few more investment properties when I did a needs analysis on myself. Okay,
Yes.
so I looked at myself as a client, and I realized that what I wanted, I kind of zeroed right in on, a condominium townhouse was best for me. Okay, even
Okay.
though it might not be the best investment, it was the best type of real estate for me to own, just from a hands off. Don't have to worry about the roof and the windows and the outside and the snow removal and the grass cutting and all of that. But yet it's still a family that's moving in there, not students. So I think it's important just to kind of understand your level of comfort.
Yeah, that's really good. And it's probably one of the biggest regrets I hear from real estate agents is I wish I would have bought more, more real estate, or invested more into real estate as well. But I like your approach. Just keep it simple, right? Real estate index funds, like, between the two of them, you're going to do really well. So
Yeah.
very good. All right. Well, great advice here, Bill. This is a great interview so far. Are you ready for the rapid fire part of the conversation?
Oh, sure. What are you gonna hit me with?
All right. So first one is, what's your favorite book?
Favorite book? It's tough to think of a book. Okay, so from a pleasure reading point of view, anything by Grisham, John Grisham. I love everything he's ever written, and there's probably a couple out there that I still haven't read, but I think I've read 20 or 30 of his books. But that's pleasure reading. So when I'm down in San Antonio next week, that'll be something I'll read. From a leadership point of view, anything by John Maxwell.
Yeah.
Okay, he just resonates with me. I mean, there's a lot out there that I've listened to over the years. I mean, Brian Tracy was one of the first, kind of, let's call it, motivational people that I listened to back in the '80s, laying in my basement, meditating, and having cassettes being played. But I would say that that's where I am. And then I guess from a thinking point of view, or understanding myself, which is probably pretty important. Dr. Wayne Dyer, he's written a
Hmm.
number of books. I was just I'll tell you this little story. I just came back. I was in Spain for I took 2 months off, September, October of last year, and I went on a pilgrimage of an 800-kilometer walk across Spain, the northern part of Spain. And I took one book with me, and that was "Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life" by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And just kind of, read that every day.
Yeah. I think one of his books, he had said, point to your mind and say, I have a millionaire mind. Right. I
Yeah,
remember that. I believe in
yeah,
one of them. And
yeah,
it's really good insight that when we walk around, to actually walk around as you are successful versus like I'm a failure. And I think
yeah,
that mindset is such a big one that I think a lot of agents struggle with. And I think that they don't even know a lot of times that they're struggling with it. And so I think that awareness, and like picking up a book from like Wayne Dyer and that draws attention to it, is just a really good starting point. It's like getting that awareness, I think is really good. So
oh, for sure. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
very cool. Yeah,
So
great
it wasn't
insight.
a book, but there you go. That's kind of what I read these days. So
Yeah, no, if you just Google them, they'll have an array of books there with with those authors. Very cool. All right. So next questions. What are 3 words that best describe you?
I'll kind of go back to 3 words I've already used: discipline, dedication, and desire. When it comes down to I believe in habits. Okay, I believe in forming good habits, eliminating bad habits, and that it's your habits that lead to your success.
Mm.
So I would say that that's where discipline, dedication, and kind of comes in following those day-to-day habits, if you will. The desire, I think that it's important. You kind of go up and down as to how much desire you have in anything you're doing, but I would say discipline, dedication, and desire.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. And last question, what advice would you give our listeners, maybe that are just starting out in real estate or they want to take their business to the next level?
Surround yourself with with successful people. Again, find a place where you can be office based. I don't understand these new agents that get in the business, and for that matter, the way some of brokerages are set up, where they don't expect you to come into the office. You get a
Mm.
license, and let's face it, the licensing process does not equip you to sell real estate.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you've got to be in an environment where you're in there on a regular basis. The structure of my team, for instance, I kind of mentioned discipline, dedication, and desire, and this is how it manifests itself. I mean, my agents are expected to be in the office every day Monday to Thursday from 9 till noon. Okay, Monday they're cleaning up their stuff from the weekend. They're getting ready for the week. They're doing their weekly planning. If they didn't do it over the weekend, we have a team meeting from 11 till 12, just kind of going over administrative stuff primarily. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're in script training from 9:30 till 10, and then from 10 to 12, we're in lead generation mode. Okay, so I mean, there's 168 hours in a week. Okay, what I just mentioned there is 10 hours. Okay, and I'm considered to be very disciplined, okay, with my team, and that's all I really expect from them. If they can control that part of their week, the rest of the week just kind of falls
Mm.
into place. So that's as I say, where some of my I have my competitors, if you will, use that against me. Okay, if you're on Bill's team, you've got to be there in the morning, you've got to do your phone calling, you've got to do lead generation, you got to, yeah, you do. Okay, but here I can show you a track record of an agent's been with me for 12 years and somebody who's been with me for 8 years, and this is what they've done, and this is the quality of life they have right now.
Mm. Yeah. Well, and I think that there's peace. Once you get into a rhythm, it's like no problem. You have that as guardrails there that you just book everything around it, but the main stuff gets done that drives your business, right? So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, I've tell agents when they ask, again, the question you ask, the secret to all this is very simple. Your success is going to be directly proportional to how many times you say something like, "Why don't we get together and chat about your real estate needs and see if I can help?"
Yeah.
That's it. Doesn't matter whether you're banging on the door and say that, somebody coming through an open house and you say that, you're sitting in a bar with your best buddy. Just, why don't we get together, chat about your real estate needs, see if I can help? The more times you say that, the more times someone's going to say yes. And now you've got that opportunity to present your value proposition, why they should hire you for their real estate needs. And as long as you're servicing your clients, you'll do fine.
Bill, can you just, for the sake of the listeners there, I just thought that was so well summarized. Can you say that again as to we'll just say the indicator of your success will come down to the
How
proportion of
many
times.
times you
Yeah.
ask somebody or you say these words, something like this, write your own
Yeah.
script. This is mine, but something like this. Why don't we get together,
Mm.
chat about your real estate needs, and see if I can help?
Yeah.
It's
It's so simple.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
simple and yet so effective. And I think that is probably one of the biggest reasons why agents aren't successful is because it becomes burdensome with everything that you got to think of instead of just coming down to a very simple question like that. So it's like having more conversations and asking somebody to meet face to face, belly to belly. That's what this business is, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the more you can get face to face with people, the more you're going to, for an appointment, we'll call that an appointment, the more
Yeah.
you'll be able to convert them to an agreement. The more agreements you have, the more potentially you're going to get a firm sale, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
That's so well said.
Yeah.
And I think if people really caught on to the wisdom that you just said, I think that they would get, we'll just say that they'll do extremely well within the next
Yeah.
12
Yeah.
months.
And I guess the other piece of that is learning a way to ask for the business. The number one reason most salespeople in any industry fail is they don't ask for the order.
Mm,
So there are certain techniques, certain scripts, certain things you could learn that just kind of logically lead to, at that appointment, you asking that person, would you like to hire me to help you with your real estate needs? I mean, because how many times you'd speak to somebody, oh, it was a great listing appointment. I think they really liked me. I really connected with the
yeah. Yeah.
wife, and the kids were fun, and da 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 da. And, well, what did they say when you said, would you like to hire me? Well, I didn't want to push it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to, and that's, as I say, that's one of the key factors to your success is just asking for the business. And
Do you have a,
sometimes it's hard.
do you have a go-to to be able to ask people to say, work with you? Is there a
Yeah,
go-to?
I use, again, and so what I'm going to give you is a script. I don't always say it like a script because it just kind of comes out in conversation. But Mark, as we sit here today, one of three things is going to happen. One is you're going to hire me to help you and your family sell your home, and that'd be great. Now, two, you may decide, Bill, you're just not the right person, or this just isn't the right time for us. And that's okay. That's totally up to you. Or three, I may decide I just can't take you on as a client. Now, the reason I say this, Mark, is as we meet this evening, we're going to uncover some needs and expectations that you have in the home selling process. And if I come across a need or an expectation that you have that I feel I just can't meet, I'd rather turn you down now than let you down later. Does that sound fair?
Sounds very fair. Yes.
Now I do my presentation, da 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 da
Yeah.
da. Mark, remember when we first sat down, I said one of three things was going to happen. And one was that you'd have a need or an expectation of me that I wouldn't be able to meet, and I wouldn't be able to take you on as a client.
Yes.
You haven't expressed any need or expectation of me that I don't feel I can't meet. I'd love to exceed. I'd
Yeah.
love to take you on as a client. Would you like to hire me to be your realtor?
Yes. Yeah.
Put your hand out there and shake their hand, So that's my go-to.
Yeah.
Okay. And it doesn't have to be those words, but again, as I say, that the first part of that I say as we're sitting down just chatting, that one of three things is going to happen. And it's an hour later after
Yes.
I've done my presentation and everything where I've said, well, remember when I said one of three things was going to happen? And I would say that if you're using that script, 80% of the time, you're going to get, positive feedback. You're going to get positive feedback. If it's a buyer coming into your office, you're going to get almost 100% of people signing.
Yeah, that's right.
So they're coming to their office hoping that they meet a realtor that they can hire.
Well, and that's so smart. I mean, at the beginning of the appointment, because you're setting the stage as in you're not just another realtor that is, and I think that's when sellers or buyers for that matter, when they smell like you're just trying to get me to do something that you want instead of, Oren Klaff talks about the idea of prizing, right? Like you as the agent, you're the prize as in you're giving an opportunity for them to work with you, but not coming from a place of like, pride or I'm better than you, but as in like there's value in who you are as a professional. I think your script does a great job of setting that stage as in you have an option of saying that this is the right fit or not as well.
Oh,
And
for sure.
I think that there's real genius in how you
Yeah.
position that.
And sometimes, again, it gives you the opportunity to turn down a client, because you realize they're not really going to be qualified for a mortgage. So, no, I don't want to get into this relationship.
Yeah.
Or, no, I'm not going to price this thing $200,000 higher. Like, remember I said one of three things was going to happen. And if we ever came across an expectation or a need that you had, well, I think we just hit that.
Yeah.
You can actually tell them that, we just found one of those objections. I can't sell this house for $950. It's an $800,000 home, or whatever however that conversation goes. Yeah.
Well, Bill, that was some really great last piece of wisdom there for the listeners. How can the listeners get a hold of you, and maybe they want to refer you some business in the Ottawa area? What's the easiest way to get in touch with you?
I've got a number of email addresses, but probably the easiest one for this crew right now, since you're sitting there, it's bill@thetulipteam.com. Thetulipteam.com. So that'll reach me, so that's probably the one of the easiest ways to reach me. If somebody just doesn't have to remember to write that down. bill@thetulipteam.com.
Well, that's great, Bill. Well, it was a real pleasure having you on the show here. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure, Mark. Thanks very much. All the best for 2025.
Awesome. And thanks for listening, guys. If you like the show, go ahead and share and subscribe to the channel where we're building a community of full out real estate agents. I love you guys and keep on going full out.